What is up, everybody? I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. Time to get another week started. And you know what? Whatever goals you have set, make them start tomorrow. Life is too short. And you know what? I'm kind of living proof of that. Anyways, without getting too deep, um, I've been wanting to play this story for a while. I believe my audience, however, it doesn't really like or hasn't seemed like you liked this type of topic, but it's just something that really interests me. And for me to, so went to college, studied, did all the things we had to do, but I absolutely hate reading books. I mean, I guess I'm more of a visual and audio learner. When it comes to books, I'm just like, ugh. So it takes a lot for me to read a book like interesting, like I have to be into it. And when this book was first written, this was 14, 15 years ago, I always had a fascination uh, with this place. And I also, when I used to, while I was married and I would spend, you know, go walking 5 miles every night to lose weight, um, I would listen to the show. It was called Coast to Coast AM. George Norrie is a host now. George Knapp will fill in sometimes, but the real, the man, the myth, the legend, Art Bell, he's the one who basically invented the show. Now, the cool thing was at the time, uh, I was dating a girl who her parents were friends with him, and at a barbecue, I got to meet him, and the coolest dude ever, funny as hell. Um, and he did like I had no idea because I had asked like, "What made you start a show like this?" And I guess it was first started as like a political show, but there was no viewers, nobody. Like, you have how many shows dedicated to politics? They were just like, ah, this is just another show, about politics. So he said, one night, because he always had open line night, that one night one guy would called him and told him about UFOs, and then he started getting into UFOs. And then the story of with George Knapp and Bob Lazar. And if you guys don't know any of this, it it'll trip you out. Bob Lazar is a great story where nobody can call bullshit on him because he's not hyperbolic about anything. He doesn't know what he was working on, only that everything was compartmentalized, which is stupid in science because if you compartmentalize certain sections of something that you're trying to duplicate, you're not getting anywhere. You're not sharing the info with somebody else to say, oh, look, this is doing this way, but what we're coming up with is going this way. Let's fix that problem. So it was a never ending problem. And they brought him in from Los Alamos Air Force Base, Los Alamos Labs. I mean, one of the most known and heard of, military installations. Not necessarily a military installation, but uh, that has been prolific throughout all wars. Um, and his story is just, he's never once changed his story in the last 30 years. Never once, you know, uh, claimed to see more than what he saw. And Joe Rogan was just amazed by him because you could tell the dude is extremely smart, extremely uh, intuitive. He built a rocket car with a jet engine, and he was on the front page of the Los Alamos newspaper. And when he came out and said what he said, all of a sudden, all his credentials from Los Alamos base or labs, they said, "Oh, we don't have a listing of him," but yet there he is on the front page where they're talking about physicist Bob Lazar creates a Honda with a jet engine on it. So when they say like government conspiracies, like I really think this dude went through it because I mean, there's just too much proof. Excuse me. And so many people had witnessed a lot of stuff with him. But then the other thing that got me into what I'm about to play is a billionaire pops into a picture. Name's Bob Bigelow. Owns casinos in Las Vegas. Like I said, dude's a millionaire. This dude is so intrigued when Bob Lazar took him and a few other. There was John Lear. His father invented the Lear airplanes, those real nice fancy ones. I mean, you have these high end, no nonsense businessmen that have an interest or wonder, hey, is there really something else out there? And this Bob Lazar took him out for 3 weeks and said every Wednesday they do like a test flight with these objects remotely because they can't figure out how they did it with humans because it was too small. And sure enough, at the exact time every Wednesday, they would see these things hovering, moving right to left, left to right, with zero G forces whatsoever. So it's creating a field of artificial gravity. And that's something that, a lot of people have tried to create, which, hey, imagine 50 years ago being on a platform like this. I mean, we've come a long way in a very short time compared to the millennia that starting from Homo sapiens on to your very first steam powered engine to, I mean, we've come a long, long way. But this billionaire ends up buying this property, puts a team of researchers together, and a billionaire could pay a lot of money if he wants. So I'll go ahead and let this tell the story. Where there's little points that they may miss, I'll fill in because I actually read the entire book front to back like 3 times. That's how much I was into it. So without further ado, this has to do with everything from UFOs, Bigfoots, Rob Bigelow, who is the billionaire. NIDS is the science team that he formed. It's the National Institute for Discovery Science. So, and this is from the New York Post. I don't think they're going to leave too much out because there was another one I was going to use, but it was skipping over a lot of important parts. So, hope you guys enjoy.
There is a place buried inside American folklore, which is supposedly home to every scary thing you could possibly imagine. UFOs, poltergeists, werewolves. When you follow the current UFO story and the cast of characters within, follow it all the way back to the beginning, you will end up at Skinwalker Ranch.
By the way, what a creepy picture to to pause on. But the real names of the owners are redacted, so they just call them the Shermans. Excuse me.
Nick, welcome back to the basement office.
Thanks, it's great to be back here.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about Skinwalker Ranch. But before we do, I want to acknowledge where I am as an investigator, a journalist, someone who's been looking at UFOs throughout the show. And I have to say, Nick, I am...
Is it Nick Pope?
A little bit more skeptical.
Yeah, it is Nick Pope.
I've had doubts,
British.
And anyone who's followed me on social...
He was like the secretary of... In Britain, it would be the equivalent of the Secretary of Defense. That's what he was, Nick Pope, the one on the left, or the one in the green shirt and sports jacket.
Media is fully aware of this. I've veered recently into a more skeptical realm.
I totally get that, and I'm not saying that I haven't been there myself. I think you start off, as you say, captivated by this. How could you not be? But eventually, you start to ask some rather more pointed questions, and there's a kind of moment, a sort of, wait a minute moment.
Right.
And you've obviously hit that.
I think in this field with ufology, it's easy to look around you at what's happening, the new news that's breaking, the new revelations that are coming out. Where is this all heading? That kind of thing. Where are we going? Where's this all heading? And I think recently I turned around and looked back. Where have we come from and why? What set us on this path, the path we're currently on? And I think the path we're currently on all started, for the most part, at Skinwalker Ranch. What is Skinwalker Ranch?
Skinwalker Ranch is a 500-acre property in Utah which has been described as a paranormal Disneyland, a place where apparently all sorts of strange things happen. UFO sightings, poltergeist activity, werewolf-like creatures. The list goes on. This is sort of a ground zero for the paranormal.
Paranormal Disneyland sounds awesome. I mean, I would totally pay VIP prices to go to that version of Disneyland. Skinwalker Ranch is an actual ranch and has been for decades, many decades. And, you know, I lived in Utah for 6 years. And I remember I wasn't there more than a few months before I first heard the tales, the urban legends. I knew nothing about Skinwalker Ranch, hadn't heard about Skinwalker Ranch when I moved to Utah. And I was in a pub and a group of friends were like, hey, have you ever heard of the Skinwalkers? And I was like, what are you talking about? No. And they said, in this particular version of the urban legend, they said, well, the Skinwalkers down in southern Utah, you'll be driving at night and suddenly these white-skinned, bright white-skinned, like half-man, half-wolf creatures will run up next to your, on two legs, run up next to your vehicle. No matter how fast you're going, they will keep pace and run next to your vehicle. You know, it's like, what are people talking about, this skinwalker thing? So what is a skinwalker itself? What is a skinwalker?
Well, a skinwalker is part of Native American mythology and belief. And it comes from mainly the Navajo culture, but the Ute tribe, which is indigenous to the particular area, have those same beliefs. And the skinwalker is essentially a malevolent witch, an individual who has various supernatural powers, and those powers include the ability to transform, to shapeshift. And this is common in various beliefs, I mean, around the world, but these skinwalkers can apparently cast spells, do various magic, and are generally thought to be malevolent.
And we should note that in the area of Skinwalker Ranch, there are 2 Native American reservations. And the folklore coming in and out of those reservations permeates through the local cities and towns and also throughout the state. So those stories of the malevolent shape-shifting witch have been around for a long time.
The whole problem that you get with oral history, given that pre-contact Native Americans didn't have a written language, it's very difficult. So you get almost like a game of telephone, and you try and kind of go back and what did these people really believe in the past? Could some of it simply be the shaman figure in the tribe wearing, as some of them apparently do, like wolf pelts?
So that's the history about this area of Skinwalker Ranch. And the ranch itself was owned by the Myers family for decades. Various members of the Myers family lived on the ranch for many, many years, at least 60 years. And then they sell the ranch to the Sherman family, Gwen and Terry Sherman. Now, the Myers family, for decades and generations, owned this location, owned this ranch, and never once see a UFO, report a UFO, see anything weird, see anything paranormal, nothing. They sell it to Terry and Gwen Sherman, and bam, Terry's talking about UFOs, strange things on the property, and a local newspaper, the Deseret News.
Okay, so first off, that's not the real name of the owners who ended up buying it. Secondly, they were told by the Myers to not dig up any ground, which was kind of odd, and they thought it odd too. Like, don't dig. You know, it was very vague, confused them. Like, why? You know, we're gonna need a dig for, you know, posts to build larger, you know, containment units for their cattle. But yeah, that was a weird request by the original owners.
Writes an article about the ranch and this guy's alleged sightings. And a millionaire in another state, in Nevada,
He's a billionaire, not a millionaire.
reads this story and says, I need that ranch. I need to go there and I need to figure out what's going on. I want to see these UFOs. And that millionaire was Robert Bigelow. Who is Robert Bigelow?
Robert Bigelow is somebody who has been at the center of UFO studies for many years. He made his money in real estate, but two of his other passions in life are the quest to discover what happens after death and UFOs. And with UFOs, maybe the paranormal more generally. And he has a history with this. He has set up, over the years, multiple organizations into which he has put, initially, his own money to study UFOs and the paranormal.
And, you know, Robert Bigelow went on, you know, the Joe Rogan show and talked about his life and how he's always been into UFOs. You know, ever since he was a child, it's been this fascination of his. And he's almost like the Howard Hughes of UFOs. You know, like he's this guy who made a lot of money doing, you know, unrelated.
So I said it before, I'll say it again. He's a billionaire now. What got him so curious ties back to the Bob Lazar story. If you guys don't know anything about that, are interested, let me know. I could, you know, tell you guys that from A to Z. Because, like I said, reading that book, knowing about Bob Lazar and Bob Bigelow's, he hired scientists, not telling them what they're looking for, just wanting to, you know, test the ground if there was any weird combinations, you know, in the samples. Didn't tell them about UFOs, didn't tell them about, you know, cryptids that were showing up. And then he meets Bob Lazar, who was actually employed at Area 51, Section S7, and he's proved it time and time again in over 30 years. He feared for his life and went to the media, and that's when, you know, he stopped fearing for his life because something happened to him and he's blaming it on the military. It kind of, you know, shines that light like, you know, just know these people are responsible for my death. Well, luckily he never, I mean, many have attempted and many have been around him when they've attempted it. And he's told his story the same way, never been hyperbolic any which way, never, you know, have changed anything about it. Anyways, and I might have already said this in the beginning, but he took that Bob Bigelow and John Lear, who's his father invented the Lear jet. It was really expensive, you know, private jets, and a couple of other guys out there, because they would test run these machines every Wednesday at Area 51 before they moved the perimeter further away. You know, it was a little bit up close. You could climb this little, not quite a mountain, but like a foothill with a path, and you could see right over the base. And sure as shit, every Wednesday at the exact time, they would bring this thing out. They could only operate it remotely because, you know, no human could really, like one or two people could fit in it. That's it. And everything else was just so small. And every night these things came out, so that really piqued Bob Bigelow's interest to where he was offering millions of dollars to those who could find, you know, actual evidential proof that there's such thing as these aliens and UFOs, or proof of immortality. And those have been up for ages. That is still going on to this day, like 14, 15 years later, to provide the actual proof of one or the other. So that's how that Bob Bigelow got started into Skinwalker Ranch, because of Bob Lazar.
Businesses, and then uses that money for his real passion. And yes, so Robert Bigelow goes to the ranch, Terry and Gwen Sherman's ranch, and buys it. He creates the National Institute of Discovery Sciences, otherwise known as NIDS, and for the sole purpose of doing scientific studies of things like what was happening at the ranch here. What is NIDS, and how big a role did it play in ufology at this time?
NIDS is, I think, very important. It was, as you say, funded by Robert Bigelow's money, so it could do things that maybe civilian UFO groups before hadn't been able to do. I mean, here was a guy writing the checks, and so if you want to bring in scientific equipment to capture high-resolution images, you could do that. Here was somebody who was prepared to underwrite this, but the other critical thing is that he was able to gather around him a group of individuals who, I think some of them were already predisposed to believe in things like this, but people with a backstory, people with connections, people in the government, the military, the intelligence community. So this was an attempt to take studies of UFOs and
That's a new spin on it, because I was always under the impression, they said it in the book, they said it on the Art Bell show, that they were unaware of what they were researching. So this is the first time I'm hearing this.
paranormal to the next level.
Included on Bigelow's NIDS team were people like Hal Puthoff, who had spent decades researching psychic powers, both for the government in operations like the CIA's Project Stargate, and for the Church of Scientology, where he achieved the church's highest spiritual level. Puthoff had also worked with Uri Geller, who claims he can bend spoons with his
The
mind.
fake ass.
Puthoff was convinced Geller's psychic powers were real. Also on the NIDS team was John Alexander, a former Army intelligence officer who sought out how to harness the power of the paranormal for military applications. Alexander is featured in the critically acclaimed nonfiction book, The Men Who Stare at Goats, a true story about how the military performed a series of tests in which they attempted to kill goats simply by staring at them. And Jacques Vallée, a world-renowned UFO researcher who believes UFOs are not extraterrestrial, but multidimensional, originating from unseen dimensions of space-time. Vallée was Steven Spielberg's main inspiration for the French scientist in his film Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
1 year after Bigelow purchases the ranch, the Deseret News, the same local paper, does a follow-up story where they talk to people who were working at the ranch for Bigelow. And the headline is, "No UFOs so far 1 year in." And they were like, "Yeah, we haven't seen anything yet." Like, the people who were there, they'd been there a year and were speaking to the press about how they hadn't seen anything, hadn't experienced anything. No UFOs, like nothing. And this was a year already into it. Nothing had happened yet. They hadn't seen anything. And so if you're following along, 60 years of no UFOs, the new owners are there like a month, and they're suddenly, they see UFOs. Bigelow buys the ranch of them because he's into UFOs, and then 1 year, no UFOs.
In his published diaries, Jacques Vallée notes a complete lack of UFOs on the ranch. On January 12, 1997, 3 NIDS staffers told Vallée, expectations of frequent sightings of UFOs at the Utah Ranch have not materialized. So what are we supposed to work on? On May 3rd, 1997, Valet wrote, "It must be noted that no UFO is being seen at the ranch, in contrast with earlier claims." And on January 11th, 1998, he states, "The Utah Ranch is quiet, with no new incidents. There hasn't been a single new case of a physical UFO there." And in 1999, Robert Bigelow is quoted in the press saying he still has not personally seen any UFOs, joking that anytime he comes to the ranch, the UFOs stay away.
And then everything, no more talking to the press. Years go by. Apparently, they're still at the ranch investigating. And then in 2005, this book comes out where it's like 280 pages worth of just the craziest stuff ever.
Yep, that's a book
Written
I
by
read.
NIDS scientist Colm Kelleher and
Front and back about 3 times I read that book, so yeah. I love that book.
paranormal journalist George Knapp. Hunt for the Skinwalker claims to be the chilling true story of unexplained phenomena on Utah's Skinwalker Ranch.
The book itself is a tell-all book of what they found, what they experienced at the ranch. And it is werewolves. It is poltergeist activity, UFOs, cattle mutilations. It reads like a science fiction horror film. And there is no appendix, no photos, no documents, just stories.
Lots of stories. Stories about Bigfoot-type monsters. Literal flying saucers landing in the backyard. Flying saucers and Bigfoot at the same time. Poltergeist hauntings. Ghostly voices of the dead. Hairy humanoids. People shooting guns at UFOs and the bullets ricocheting off the metal body of the spaceship. Quote, aliens, end quote. Interdimensional portals opening up and creatures crawling out of them. Ape-like creatures, reptilian creatures, beast creature, and a bulletproof wolf creature that couldn't be killed no matter how many times they shot it. But no evidence of any kind to back up any of these stories has ever been presented. George Knapp, who's built an entire career around stories of UFOs and the paranormal, and who was one of the authors of the Hunt for the Skinwalker book, was asked about evidence on the Joe Rogan show.
Because they weren't there
Is
with
there
cameras.
any evidence?
Like for the first 20 months when the rancher is there, they don't have any evidence because he's not a paranormal investigator.
At this point, Knapp begins telling more stories about UFOs on and near the ranch. Rogan then interrupts and asks again.
Again, is there any evidence?
No, not really.
Oh.
If you're looking for physical evidence and solid proof, and they don't have it.
Oh. Knapp saying there's no proof or evidence is quite strange, considering the book Knapp co-authored says this: "We obtained an intriguing body of physical evidence to support many of the accounts described in the book." Okay, so where is that intriguing body of physical evidence?
Like, if you were in possession of the best proof that we're not alone, there's another dimension, ghosts exist, there's life after death, would you not take that to bigger and better and louder organizations beyond just a book for sale?
I would, yeah, absolutely. I suppose the issue might be, does the paranormal allow itself to fall within the framework of the scientific method in terms, for example, of repeatability? Or is it not, I don't want to say nebulous, but more random, abstract, something that would make it very difficult to write it up in a way that could get into science or nature? And a lot of people would say the answer to that question is yes. There is a sort of randomness about it, but also And this is something that goes back to ideas of Native American folklore and other things. The trickster aspect of the phenomenon more generally. I mean, almost every culture has the concept of a trickster god. And some people say that the paranormal itself displays a lot of that. It's like it's toying with you. It dangles evidence in front of you, and just as you think you're going to get it, it snatches it away.
So we're dealing with Loki.
On my way down to coordinate search and rescue. On my way down to coordinate search and rescue. I mean, honestly, how do you keep your food? Shut up.
But in reality, while all that may sound fun and weird, again, no evidence at all has been provided of any such trickster or skinwalker or even Loki. Since this part of the Skinwalker story occurred now many decades ago, a lot of the early key witnesses have since passed away. But we are lucky that a record of their testimonies was documented by an objective source completely outside the Bigelow circle and uninvolved with Skinwalker Ranch. Frank Salisbury, a botanist with a PhD in plant physiology and geochemistry, wrote and published several books on plants and flowers. But stuck in the middle of his resume is a 1974 book he wrote titled The Utah UFO Display, a biologist's report. In 2010, he released a second edition of the book, this time including the Skinwalker story and new candid interviews with Myers and Sherman family members. Regarding whether the Myers family ever experienced UFOs or anything paranormal on the ranch during the 60 years they owned it, Garth Myers told Salisbury, "There were never any signs of that. There was nothing, unequivocally, absolutely nothing. There were no UFOs." Salisbury also interviewed Terry Sherman, who again purchased the ranch from the Myers, claimed to have seen UFOs, and then sold the ranch to Robert Bigelow for $200,000. Sherman was then hired by Bigelow to help with the Skinwalker Ranch investigation, and Sherman's experiences are a major portion of the Hunt for the Skinwalker book. Salisbury assumed, logically, that since Sherman's detailed accounts of paranormal activity are all over the book, that he had been extensively interviewed for the book. But as it turns out, Sherman didn't even know a book was being written about his family's experiences until the book was published. And he had never met George Knapp, although they had talked on the phone, but not about the book. Sherman basically supports Garth Myers' version of the history of the ranch. So where did the exaggerated version, the ranch as the center of UFO activity, come from? Well, that's a great question for the book's authors, Colm Kelleher and George Knapp, both of whom would not return multiple requests from me for comment. The 2005 release of Hunt for the Skinwalker catapulted the ranch's popularity on a national scale. Despite the ranch being closed to the public and guards prohibiting unauthorized entry, UFO believers would drive many hours just to sit outside the ranch's closed gates, hoping to see something. Many truly believed Robert Bigelow and his team of investigators at the National Institute of Discovery Sciences had discovered something that would change the course of human history forever.
What happens with NIDS? What's the ultimate fate of the National Institute of Discovery Sciences, this same organization that made all these amazing discoveries? What's their ultimate fate?
The plug gets pulled.
Okay, so they shut it down.
They shut it down. Now, you could say there are two schools of thought about why you would shut it down.
Okay.
One is that you didn't find anything, but two is you found what you were looking for.
Okay. And
then you don't need to search anymore.
Okay, but then you do what? You do what with that? Oh, we found it. We found it. Now we have to write a book and sell it for $20 on Amazon. Like what? What do you do with that?
The answer is apparently nothing. In 2004, in an announcement on the NIDS website, Bigelow stated his reason for shutting down active investigations at Skinwalker Ranch was simply nothing was happening at Skinwalker Ranch. We have not had the need to do any major investigative work for well over 2.5 years. It is unfortunate that there isn't more activity, as there was in the past, that warrants investigation. However, he added, should substantial activity occur with a need for investigation, the NIDS will be reactivated with new personnel. Skinwalker Ranch was dead. The stories of aliens, werewolves, and ghosts had stopped. The scientists at the ranch packed their bags and left, leaving behind a giant mystery. But this story was far from over. In 2007, a scientist working at the Pentagon picked up Hunt for the Skinwalker, and he read it cover to cover. He was captivated, and he believed the stories could actually be true. And that's when this story really gets weird.
Wow, okay, I didn't know about the second part. Huh. Doesn't look like a part 2 has been made yet. Okay, so essentially in the book, and I'm not biased whatsoever, you know, you do have to have evidence if you're going to really claim something as big as this. And there was a lot of stuff photographed by the Sherman family, but I mean, things that couldn't be explained. He had one really sad story, because I'm a huge dog lover. He had his 2 best hounds with him, just sitting on the porch after a long day, and all of a sudden just saw these blue balls of light just like kind of hovering near the house, and it was still daytime, so his dogs are all intent looking at it, and then they chase after it, and about maybe 20 seconds into it, he hears them yelp and grabs his gun, goes out there to look, and his dogs were essentially turned to gel. I mean, something evaporated them and put them in that kind of place. The craziest one is, and they have photos of it, there's a trailer that they would use to take, you know, one of their bovine. Actually, they were Black Angus cows. You know, they had just one of their smaller trailers, and they went and checked on them, made sure everything was good. Then they went around the perimeter fixing a few of the fences. And when they came back to check on the bulls again, they couldn't find any. So they looked around for 4 or 5 hours just wondering, because, I mean, that's their livelihood. That's what they did for a living, is sell their Black Angus cows. And when you're having, you know, cow mutilations, I mean, on one aspect, I cannot see, you know, simple folk doesn't mean they're dumb. It just means they're not, you know, into this type of stuff. But, you know, for simple folk, they couldn't explain what was going on. And when they're looking for these cows and everything, they just happened to open this small little trailer, and 5 of them were inside on top of one another. That they were shocked that it didn't, you know, burst wide open because of how humongous the Black Angus cows are. And I, like some of you may know, but my aunt actually had a small little farm where they bred Black Angus cows, and those fuckers are huge, man. I'm like, God damn, these things are big. And 5 of them fit in this damn little trailer. When they were talking about, you know, shooting at a werewolf, that was an interesting story too, because they caught a picture of it walking away, and then they analyzed how high, you know, the height of it. But they said him and his son were out and about, you know, doing their daily chores, and they come on this site of this huge dog, they thought, or coyote or something, and then they discern, okay, it looks like a wolf, but it's massive. And so it just walks up, kind of like within 20 feet of them and looks over, and it walks over to the bull cage. And they say, starts sniffing, smelling around. And there was one of those black Angus cows that came by and like was curious too. And they said that this wolf grabbed onto it by its head and just was able to pull it up off the ground and side to side with just its neck muscles and his jaws. He got out, Mr. Sherman got out his 30-06. His son had a pretty powerful rifle, and they shot it, and they kept on shooting it. It finally let go of the cow. The cow was fine, but no matter how many times they shot it, it didn't seem to do shit to it. They said it bled a little bit, but for as many times as they shot it, there's no way it should have lived, was basically what they were saying. So yeah, I mean, crazy story. It's a good book. I like the book, and even though they showed the skit with the not Bob Lazar, god damn it, or George Knapp and Joe Rogan asking him, but is there real proof? I would be stuck in his same shoes and say, no, there hasn't been. It's all been visual. It hasn't been captured yet. And if they were in the right place at the right time, me personally, I believe they would have found something. But if not, like I said, I'm not biased whatsoever. If I spent time there, didn't see shit for 2 years, I'd be like, yeah, there's nothing here. The name doesn't precede itself. So that's just my take on it. Anyways, I hope you guys found this somewhat intriguing. And yeah, hopefully I'll upload some better videos. Haven't had anybody watching the videos lately, but that's okay, because it's going to pop right back up. I know it. I hate saying this, but like and subscribe if you like the content. And yeah, you'll see me here pretty soon. So, peace. I need to do that like right when I'm stopping the video, like right here. Peace.